You're watching Cable 2.
Good morning and welcome to the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Board of Education special called meeting, staff safety and security information workshop for, October the 7th, 2021. I'm Shay Woodbury, Chair of the Board. We're going to officially call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum established. We have also this morning Board Member Bramer coming in virtually. And I think Board Member Motzinger may be coming on later, but if not, please pray for she and her family. I think her husband was taken to the hospital, so we definitely have her in our prayers. So we're going to go right into the discussion item, which is the safety and security information, I think presented by Jonathan Wilson. Oh, we're going to first take it to Trish McManus, our superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Woodbury, and thank you, board members, for spending your first 2 hours of this Thursday morning with us to really dive deeper into safety and security. Although we're sitting in this format, I know the last two meetings we had in 2019 were more conducive to kind of that collaborative feel. So we still want that to be the case. We want you all to be able to, we're going to share information and make it informative, but then we're going to pause after each section so that you actually have time to talk. And although we're sitting like this, hopefully that still is able to happen, where you can actually ask questions of staff and actually talk together and provide feedback and any suggestions on the information that we're sharing to you. So today, in just a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pratt. We have 4 staff members that will be sharing information with you this morning, and he'll go over the agenda and the primary goals. But I did want to tell you and to reiterate something that I've been saying. As we think about safety and security in our schools, we are talking about several layers of safety. We are talking about not just about physical security of a building, which is a major part of safety, but we're also talking about social, emotional, mental, and behavioral health safety of our students, in addition to the physical perimeter, the surrounding areas of security. And so we're going to be covering all of those today. And I know 2 hours is probably not enough time to cover, because that's a lot of information. So we're going to give you some specific details. And if we need to come back at a later time with even more, we can do that again. So again, the other thing I wanted to make sure that I said before we got started is, as we think about safety, security, and the well-being of our students, we are also going to be focusing on today on prevention, which is really, really important, intervention, which is really, really important, and then also on the back end of that is then the security piece of this. So it's three-pronged approach, or our response as well. We cannot just put Band-Aid measures on things and not address the prevention. And so when I say that, what I mean is that, our students come to school with trauma that they have faced. Adults come to school with trauma that they faced, and we don't even know what that looks like. One of my favorite books that I've read, and it's a tiny book, but it is powerful. I have it with me here. It's called 2 Backpacks, and it's basically written by Dr. Adolph Brown, and he says it's called Learning Their Story and Building Relationships with a Trauma-Informed Perspective. The statistics in here about people, children, and adults that have faced a traumatic experience are astounding. It is such a large number, and those experiences can be in the form of so many things. And what happens is behaviors that come out then in schools are a direct result of that. And so we walk a fine line when we are addressing our students on how do we put things in place to have students feel connected, feel capable, feel cared for, so they can deal with that trauma, versus just dismiss them, exclude them, and they will never get to deal with the trauma, and it will build up and can result in violent behavior. So I am no mental health expert, but what I am is a person that knows when kids are in a safe, caring, structured, disciplined, supportive environment, they can excel even when they do have the trauma that they're dealing with when they walk in the door. So what we're going to share with you today is going to address the well-being, the entire well-being of our children, starting with Jonathan on the security, but then it's going to go way deeper into all of those prevention and intervention strategies as well. The one thing I love about this book, and this will make it real to you, everyone, is it's called Two Backpacks for a reason, because all of us in this room and every one of our students that walks in the door, they have the backpack you can see that has their basic supplies and all of that. Then they have the invisible backpack that you cannot see. And uncovering what's in the invisible backpack and knowing the stories of our students and knowing why they're making some of the decisions they're making is critical for the prevention of future misbehavior, of future actions that could cause harm to others. There is not a student, and this is what I bring to the table every day in my philosophy. There's not a student that we cannot reach. And I know that not everybody agrees with that, but I believe it wholeheartedly, or I would not be sitting here. I believe we can reach every one of them, and I believe we can get them on the right path, those that are making choices that are not on that right path. So again, I just wanted to set the stage for this briefing. You're going to get a lot of information, and hopefully it's enough time to have you dissect it and to talk and to really be part of the solution here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pratt.
Good morning. So as Superintendent McManus said, we're here today to talk about strategies and practices that we're going to implement or are implementing in our school related to security and safety. And those key areas include, as she stated, physical safety and security, social, emotional, and mental health supports, and then lastly, behavior management and school climate and culture supports. So this morning, if our agenda is posted here, we'll start with Mr. Wilson, who's going to give us an update on our physical safety and security. Then we'll move right into student services with Dr. Frederica Stokes, who's going to talk to us around social, emotional, and mental health supports that we have in the district. And then we'll end our presentation with Shannon Dawson, who's going to talk about our behavior supports that we're implementing as our core Tier 1 strategies within the district. And so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan.
Good morning, Chair Woodbury, Barry, Board, and Ms. McManus. First, before I get into the slides, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to have a discussion about something that seems to be so prevalent and ongoing topic in our community. But I will say that this is not a situation that's unique to Winston for Forsyth County Schools. As evidenced yesterday, there was a school shooting in Texas, and there's issues that happen in neighboring counties where things are similar to us, are concerning in nature of what's happening in schools. So everyone across the country is seeing an increase in concerning behaviors and discipline and criminal activity. I can't get up here to tell you that, how do I do this? That we have all the answers to say that we have the answer to all these questions. And I think that anybody that tells you that they do is doing you a great disservice, because there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of pieces. And so, like Dr. Pratt said, we're going to talk to you some about some of these today. So current safety and security measures. I will tell you, some of you were there. In 2019, we did a tabletop exercise. And that tabletop exercise was to test our plans to see how we responded and how we reacted. And what we were told after that was that we had a forward-leaning emergency management plan, that our plans were strong, and that we did a good job. Obviously, there's things that we can improve on. If we're not willing to look ourselves in the mirror and see what's wrong with ourselves, then we can't make positive changes. So we continue to do that each and every day. Cameras in schools. As you know, as part of the 2016 bond, all cameras were to be brought to a standard of IP cameras in our schools. Elementary schools are completed. High schools are halfway done. We are ready to now expedite with the next level of the next group of high schools. And these were some of our most challenging ones that you see: East, West, Reagan, Atkins, and the Career Center. And then obviously our ongoing construction projects. As Coleman Moore adds 2 buildings, builds new buildings, makes improvements to current structures, then those cameras are being updated at that same point. In the recent days, we've created a notification when any of our security devices go offline. So we have the cameras, but we also have door access controls that we're going to talk about in a minute. But when those systems go down, we now have a way that we're notified when they go down. For instance, the other day, an entire milestone system went down and we were notified. It was not based on anything that was particularly wrong. It was a software update or some other piece of communication that talks between the cameras and our system, but we were able to address that within a few minutes and working through it with a milestone company. We have a single point of entry for our elementary schools. We've had that for years with the little device that was at the front door. I can't remember the name of it because we got rid of A-phone. So the A-phones, we don't have the A-phones anymore. We put the 2-in devices there as part of a 2019 security grant that we received. And so that continues to be good. Kids are well supervised at the elementary school level, so that front door being controlled is very important. In our middle schools, we have control ports of entry. Again, we have that same 2-in intercom camera device at the front door, but we also have keypads and card readers that go between buildings so that if a child needs to go from one building to the next, they might not be supervised by an adult for that little short period of time, but the 2 closest points, we control those entry points. We're going to expand that. Starting next week, at 2 of our schools, you'll see access control being placed in those 2 schools, where it would work the same as it does in the middle school, where we have the intercom system at the front door. Folks are kept outside. They're given an opportunity to identify themselves and to announce why they're at the school. At that point, then they can be brought in, directed to come to the office, sign into the visitor management system, and then go about their business and do what they need to do. Students have to go from building to building in high school, and it's very challenging. Again, back to those other 2 schools, East and West, being a campus-style environment, we need to look at those. But we've already identified the doors that need the devices. We've already identified and walked the campuses, and those plans are in the works at the point that we can get to them. We continue to have a strong collaboration with all of our law enforcement partners, whether it's the Sheriff's Department being in our schools with our SRO program. Winston-Salem Police Department still provides valuable intelligence for us. They obviously work in the communities at night, weekends, and deal with these students where they live, if they live within the city. So they sometimes are very familiar with the students and their families. And so we continue to partner with them and the Kernersville Police Department in the same manner. And Kernersville Police Department also serves within our schools as in the SRO program. Sorry, my glasses are fogging up here. Working with Hondo, if you hadn't had a chance to see K9 Hondo at the Sheriff's Department, he's going around from school to school. Maybe sometime he'll come to some of our board meetings and stand out front. And so his job is to sniff the air around a person so that if they had a smell about them that is associated with a weapon, whether it be, if it's associated with a weapon, then the dog could pick that smell up and identify a weapon on campus or anywhere else. Safety drills. We're required by law to do certain safety drills, and so the schools follow those a plan, and it gives them an opportunity to test their plans and also to improve time frames and how quickly they go into action. Additional safety and security measures that are being implemented and are being piloted is beginning random wanding checks in our schools. So there's 2 ways you could do metal detector. You could put a metal detector at a door. That may or may not work, and especially as many doors as our schools have. You could do random wanding, but the pilot within the second 9 weeks of school, if we do random wanding, when we do random wanding, it would have to be in some sort of a pattern, so that you're not singling anyone out, that you're actually, it is a deterrent to make sure that you may or may not be wanding on a certain day. Begin implementation of clear book bags pilot program within the second 9 weeks of school. This is being done with the full support of the principals at those schools. The principals were asked and supported that. And moving forward, you'll see that, I think, in the second 9 weeks. District-wide assessment teams going into specific schools. This gives us an opportunity to look at how traffic flow within the school, how students are being supported, and how students are being supervised,
and just basically give us a snapshot picture as to what schools, how they're performing, and what improvements they may need to make. And then working with the national security expert for additional recommendations. We talked to it at a previous board meeting about hiring a security consultant to come in. I think we've had some discussions with one. There's some ongoing discussions as far as getting this person on board to look at our plans. And I feel like that he or she will find that our plans are strong, but hopefully they can provide us some additional things to follow up on and make better. And then providing intensive training in social and emotional learning, restorative practices, and gang intervention for school leadership teams. Implementation of bully patrol. As you know, we've had bully patrol in our schools for as long as I've been here. And that's an opportunity for students or parents or anyone in the community to reach out to us via phone, through an email, or through the internet. On the webpage, every school webpage has a link to bully patrol. But we've expanded those teams in anticipation of bringing on the Say Something app in our middle and high schools. We want to have where they will have a team of folks that will receive a tip. We are going to emulate that and do the same thing in our elementary schools, where it's not just a tip that comes to central office and then it's disseminated to one particular person at the school. But there's more than one person who could receive that tip to address the needs. It may be the principal in some case, or it may go straight to a guidance counselor, or it may come back to central office depending on what the tip may be. But those teams have been created and are being used today. Implement the Say Something anonymous reporting system. We talked last time that I spoke to you in the board meeting that we were moving forward with that. The plan is to have Say Something fully implemented by January of 2022. Our training, all the teams have been created. They're in the P3 system now. Those folks that are on those teams some of them have already completed their training. Other ones will be completing training between now and the end of this month. And so hopefully by the end of October, our teams will be fully trained. In November, we'll train our teachers and staff in schools during staff meetings. And then in December, students will be trained in their health and PE if they are in middle school and in extended homeroom in a high school setting. That's how those kids will be trained. Additional 800 megahertz radio system for district response. So we had this 800 megahertz radio system for quite a while. We're putting additional radios in place. That's in anticipation of the county. There's a county plan to improve the 800 megahertz system across the county. So if I had my wishes, I'd like to see one of those radios on every school bus and in the hands of almost every school member staff that would respond on the district level that needs that. Again, it's an expensive program, but with the county support, there's been we've already identified how many radios we have and how many radios we need. And working with the Sheriff's Department to implement a gang intervention group to support our schools. I think that's called the JIT team, Juvenile Intervention Team. I believe that's what it's called. And I think the Sheriff's Department briefed the county commissioners on that this week or last week. And to meet with the principals to review their school safety plans, to make sure that their plans are in line with the districts and to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and then a plan appropriate school and district level training. We can't do too much training. Finding the time to do the training is always a challenge, but we need to train as much as we possibly can. So our safety and security personnel update is we have one SRO in all of our traditional middle and high schools. Excuse me. That was part of this year's contract. It's been part of the contract for years, but now it's completely with the Sheriff's Office. 3 to 4 behavioral assistants at the Parkland High School, and that is in progress. 2 SROs in 5 specific schools. That is in progress. I think it's been agreed, is in moving forward. Enhancement of our district safety, security, and emergency management team. As you know, that's something that we've needed for quite a while. I've been busy trying to look at plans to do a lot of things, so I really do appreciate the help that's coming our way to make sure that we can make sure the work gets done and done effectively and efficiently. 3 to 4 behavioral assistants at Mount Tabor. That is also in progress, and a dean of students at Mount Tabor and Parkland. So this just gives you a snapshot of what the new safety, security, emergency management part will look like. 2 directors. Those 2 directors will basically divide what Jonathan Wilson currently does, and divided it into basic programming and supervising programs and the project management to keep our security, our technology, and things moving forward, and then folks working underneath them. On the left side of that slide, you'll see 2 campus security managers, and those managers will work specifically with the schools to make sure that the schools develop those strong plans and have those supports that they need as quickly as possible. With that, I'll start with the first question. Do you have any questions about the information that we've presented to you already?
Yes, Jonathan, and thank you so much. You're doing a remarkable job. Just thank you so much. I have a couple of questions. The cameras that you have installed and are continuing to install, where are the monitors for that? Are there some in the sheriff's and in the police, or is it just in that control room in the ed building?
So no, so those cameras, the reason we chose this camera system with Milestone is that those cameras can actually be on my phone. I can pull that up. Principals can pull it up on their phone or at their desk.
Okay.
It's also on a web client, so they can actually pull there are certain principals who want to see what's going on at their school at night, so they can log in. The sheriff's office does have access to our cameras, and they can pull it up when they need to for an emergency situation. It's not real live monitoring continuously because they don't have time for that.
I was wondering.
Protecting the community, but in an event that would happen, then they have the ability to turn those cameras on and see what's going on within the school as their officers respond.
Okay, and then second question, you were talking about the behavior assistance at Parkland and at Mount Tabor. So if we have issues at other high schools, do these rotate to the other schools? Or are they just going to be stationed at those 2 schools?
Dr. Pratt, speak to that.
So currently, we're stationing those positions at those 2 high schools. However, we are in conversation with schools to determine needs if they need additional assistance in their buildings.
Okay.
So how were those determined?
Just based on the previous incidents over the last several months. And so we wanted to provide some additional support with them, so we gave them additional resources.
Okay.
And so these positions really are to work very closely with principals to make sure that they are de-escalating events in the buildings, developing strong relationships with kids, someone they can see in the hallways, they can interact with, and really help them have an extra set of eyes and ears in the building as the day move forward. So if they see something, hear something, report it to an administrator so that they can de-escalate the situation before.
I'm not questioning the need at all.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about, I'd like to see the data for how those 2 schools are chosen versus other schools that are having, that size-wise, number of incidences, number of students suspended for assault.
Yes, we can provide that for you.
Just to make sure that it's not just in reaction to one, a couple incidences, but we're really looking at where are the problems.
Yes, ma'am. We can
Okay.
do that for you.
I also wanted to say, so that is sending in those assessment teams. So early on, Mount Tabor, obviously, we went there first, Parkland, there were a series of things, but we have, Reynolds is on the list to get an assessment, Paisley is on the list for an assessment. So everyone will get this assessment one at a time to figure out what are additional supports that might be needed. So it literally is data-driven, so that's why kind of the order we're taking. And again, working with the principal. So when we sat down with the principal, like when we sat with Mr. Weiss and his team, Principal Weiss and his team, many of the things that you're going to see specific to that school were things that they came forward with and said, these are things that we think would help. That is one school. I know there was a little bit of looking like, what do you all mean backpacks? This is not a district-wide pilot, by the way. This is a school-specific pilot of schools that have said we'd like to try this. So the details, we are not even prepared to roll out those details yet because there has to be a big communication piece with parents, providing of backpacks. So again, that is very specific to a school to see, does this work? And also in response to many emails we've received from parents at specific schools, not district-wide. That's why we're not doing this right now district-wide. It's to see how that even works, because we've never done that in our district.
Yeah, and my concern is that sometimes people in the building are a little hesitant to take these measures on because of the stigma, they're afraid it will attach to the school. And that's why I think if it's more data-driven than a principal saying, yes, they want it or no, because, I mean, if I was the principal of a school, I would feel like I'm not being the best principal if I need extra help. That's just the mentality, I think, of some people, and we need to make sure that they understand they're still a great principal, but they still need extra help based on what's going on in their school.
Yes.
So I think I appreciate the kind of the thought and hearing, you know, if you're hearing from folks about, you know, like the clear backpacks and trying to do that. I don't like even piloting that. I think you are, in a sense, punishing most of our students who are doing the right thing. There's definitely some sense of privacy, and there's also has to be some sense that, you know, that's, I don't know, what's the data, does that make us feel safer? Or is there data that says that stops anyone from bringing anything in for sure? Because we know many times things can come into a school and it's not in a backpack. You know, I wouldn't want to be a student or a staff member who felt like the place that I'm at for this many hours a day is not safe. And we know that there are things going on across the country in schools. So, you know, we keep saying we don't want to make, we don't want to make kind of knee-jerk reactions to what happened on September 1st, but it seems like we are doing that. So we have a pilot here, we're doing something else over here. I don't think that sends a good message to the folks that are in the building. And I, you know, and we can do, you know, if we want to, you know, the dog comes in and we're doing something random that way, and then we have random wanding, and I understand that, you know, obviously when there are instances that are coming from the community, maybe at a higher rate into a particular school, but some of this is, it seems like we're just kind of firing off bullets. You know, that's not a good term. We're firing off ideas in different ways, and it's not. I don't know. It doesn't feel good to me. So
I will.
It doesn't feel like it really doesn't feel like a plan. And again, it feels kind of knee-jerk. And you know, why would we go through trying to get, you know, like you even said, it takes a lot of communication and buy-in. Do we really need to do that right now? And if that's what we really need to do, back to the data, where's the national data that shows that's what we need to do?
Right. So I understand what you're saying completely, and I can see why. So knee-jerk would probably, to me, have been, we're going to go clear book bags across this entire district. Like, that's knee-jerk. That's, you know, we're going to put metal detectors up in every school. This was a request of one school. That's why we're piloting there. It was one of the interventions they brought forth to say, is there any way we could do this? And so, again, getting staff, students, parents in that school on board. When we said second 9 weeks, it doesn't mean in 2 weeks we're going forward. Second 9 weeks is the entire period of second 9 weeks. So there's going to have to be some groundwork laid, but we wanted to be very transparent with the board today that is something that a school asked. Could that be part of their implementation of security? I'm not sure there's going to be a national amount of data that says this is a practice that is effective. I mean, it is, again, it's another security measure that may create a sense of, okay, well, at least we can see what's in the book bag. Again, there's no national, there could be, I could be wrong. I have not done a research search, basically, to figure out, is that a practice that will even help? I'm sure, and just like with all other research, I'm sure you can find people that say it will and people that will say it won't. But again, we're going school by school, and what are the interventions that school feels will help in that moment. And when a school does that, my assumption would be they've talked to staff, they've talked to students, they've talked to parents, and this is kind of what folks are saying. So again, a pilot does not mean we're going to do this across the district. We want to see if this is something that actually leads to, and again, a lot of security measures, they really are about how does it make people feel in that space of safety and security. So that's why I think it's important that we listen to the folks.
And how are we going to measure that that's successful, that they feel safe? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just, I
Yeah.
think I don't like the clear backpacks. I think yeah, okay.
Well,
Stop that.
my concern around the clear backpacks piece is that the first and foremost is the privacy of students. I think
Yes.
also that just to call a spade, I think that for female students in particular, or just anyone who has any type of like need for privacy, when you have a clear backpack, where are they supposed to put materials that they may not want the entire school to see or to be in? I mean, I just think it's kind of problematic for me. But I think additionally, when you talk about a school asked, Madam Superintendent, what was that process like? So you said you hope that the students and the staff and teachers were involved in that process, but is that definitive? Do you know that was the case? Because I guess at the end of the day, in my mind, a clear backpack policy has more to do with the feel than the sort of reality of like, is this going to make your building safer?
So the ask was through the administrative team. So that's basically a meeting of what are all the things that would help your school. And so that was one of their asks. Is this a possibility? And so, yeah, as far as the steps that were taken prior to coming to the table, I'm not 100% sure about that. But you know, if I, as a principal, were going to ask for something that would be a completely different practice, I'm not saying it's a policy, I'm saying it's a practice or a strategy, I would have gotten input from folks on my school campus. I'm assuming that is what happened. I
Okay.
can't tell you for sure.
So while I want to sort of go back to the behavior specialist as well. So in terms of criteria for hiring these folks, are they going to be required to have any sort of background or you know, the working with children, conflict mediation, or is that something we're going to equip them with after they're hired? Additionally, my concern is that these positions, I don't want these positions to sort of contribute to these sort of systemic issues around the criminalization of children. So I want to make sure that whoever fill these positions are sort of cognizant of these issues and are there for support, and not necessarily sort of in a punitive fashion. Can you speak to that, Dr. Pratt?
Yes, so yes, we will provide the professional development for them. Some of them will have some expertise coming into the positions, but we want to make sure that we build that common language and that common expectations that we expect out of these positions. So we'll be working along with our best team, our student behavior team, to train those individuals to make sure that they understand their duties and their responsibility and how they should be engaging with students in the building.
Okay. And then one last question that I think, Dr. Pratt, you might be able to answer is around the Dean of Students at both Parkland and Mount Tabor. So
Yes.
after that is, you are going to add a Dean of Students to both schools.
Yes, sir.
And so right now, both schools have 2 APs and API. Is that correct?
Correct.
So they would have it'll be each of them would have 2 APs, an API, and a Dean of Students.
Yes, sir.
And the Dean of Students would be focused on student discipline and culture.
Culture and climate,
Culture
and
and
so the
climate.
responsibility as we implement our core Tier 1, they will be responsible for implementing that within the school, developing relationships with students, and also providing professional development opportunities for staff as needed.
And so the decision to add a Dean of Students is again sort of grounded in the same justification as the behavioral assistance.
Yes, sir, and that person will work very closely with them as well.
Okay, thank you.
I know I talk about this a lot, but it was the most important thing I've done or been a part of since I've been on school board. A while back, we formed a little group, and it was with some teachers at Philo Hill. And y'all might get tired of me talking about this, but it did work. And we formed a group, and we called it the Love Gang. And I don't know, y'all probably hadn't even ever heard of the Love Gang at Philo Hill. But what we did, we got the people in the community to buy shirts. And we bought these black shirts, you know, because we had to look cool, and put in white the Love Gang. And these kids were the worst kids at the time when they first came into the school. I mean, the worst. If there was any stealing, you could almost look in the eye and say, hey, we know it was you, buddy. But I think getting involved and having something positive was probably the best thing that we ever did. Being on the school board, we've done a lot of things. I voted for all this money stuff and blah, blah, blah. And that for me, I saw kids' lives change. At graduation, I saw these kids graduate. And it's because we put ourselves out and we gave them something to look forward to. Some of these kids had never eaten in a restaurant. It was just so many different things, and it was all positive. And I think that is what probably bothers me the most being on the school board now, is not seeing the positive things that we can do as a group in the schools for these kids. And I know we're talking about safety and we're talking about different type things that we're doing now. But I found with the kids, the thing was to be able to wrap your arm around the kid and let them know it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay because we're here and we are going to look after you. Now, that's been kind of not going now, you know, after a while. It just kind of stopped. But as far as making an impact on those kids, and they put that, and these were gang members, y'all. I'm not talking about, you know, the best kids on the block. These were gang members. But they put on those little black shirts. I got mine, I'll wear it one day. And it says the Love Gang. And I swear I saw those kids change. And when graduation came, one came up to me at graduation and just hugged me. Yeah. And I hadn't done anything. But it was the feel, and it was just the feel of somebody caring and feeling important and not all the time talking about guns and what they're going to do. But I think we need that in our school.
Lyda, we have that in a lot of our schools. I mean, my son was part of a program called the Gentlemen's Club, which we thought was kind of a funny name when he came home with that T-shirt. But there's clubs like that all throughout our schools. I mean, you can participate again. I don't know if the one at Philo Hill is still going, but a lot of our schools have those types of clubs.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing before we jump in? So just remember, Jonathan's part of this with security is 1/3 of a whole presentation. You're going to now hear in the next 15, actually the next 15 and the next 15 after that, the actual
Wait, I have a question.
We're coming to, we're not moving yet. I just wanted to say, we're coming to you, Board Member Bramer. I just wanted to say that the other 2/3 of this presentation is going to wrap around the prevention, which is critical. And so Board Member Calvert-Hayes, what you're describing is what will change the future. Right. These security measures are the external safety of people feeling like we've got security measures in place. We're going to go to the other 2/3 of this presentation, and you're going to hear exactly what you're talking about, but you are spot on with those are the things that get to the root cause of the issues and to be able to change the trajectory for our kids. And so, yeah, absolutely. But I'm sorry, Board Member Bramer, did you want to ask yours or make your statement or ask your question?
Yeah, I have a question about this program. So I have a couple concerns. First, who's paying for the backpacks and where are they getting them? Because, I mean, we've already put tons of money into supplies for our kids to go to school to begin with, and I can't see a lot of people having the money for those backpacks or where to begin to order them. So, I mean, the cost of the backpack, there's some of the kids at those schools are the hardest hit financially, and they're just not going to have the money for that. Second, what about the lockers for every single student? Not every school has enough lockers for their student population, so you can't put them away and or just like another bag and put it away and carry a backpack around the school because you don't have a locker to store anything in. So you know, we would have to like retrofit for lockers. And so I have some logistics concerns around how this could possibly and financially happen and physically happen. I mean, we do have a pilot school, but then we are looking at other schools that don't have the same thing also. So this is a much bigger idea, and it's an expensive one.
Right, so Board Member Bramer.
And then,
Yeah, oh, sorry.
and the privacy, again, that Alex mentioned for girls, I mean, everybody knows why, and that needs to be encountered too.
I will address the part about funding. So the school that asked about this intervention, we actually priced it out, and we would actually provide, we would not expect students that have already spent money on a backpack this year to have to go back out and spend money on another backpack. So we would provide the resource for this pilot. So yeah, so I wanted to address that. The locker part of this, you know what, I don't see lockers being used at all in our schools. They're not used in our schools. I can't talk to why. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, but I'm in schools weekly and I don't see them being used at all. Okay, I can't talk to that. I don't know if anybody else can, but I can. I would need to check with our high school principals or middle school, like why aren't we using them? I'm not sure if it's time between passing periods. I'm not sure if it was a safety measure at one point. I can't answer that question. About the privacy, that's something we need to talk more about if we move forward on this pilot.
Yes, and I want to circle back around to the communication piece with lockdowns with the neighboring schools. You know, for instance, when we had the event at Mount Tabor, Board Member Crawley and I were substituting at Old Richmond Elementary School, and they were locking down. I mean, everybody was locking down in the whole county, and, you know, it created some mass hysteria, I think. And then I had heard about at Sherwood Elementary, they were putting the kids, you know, turning the lights off, and they were sitting there on the floor for several hours. What kind of consistent protocols are you going to put in place to, you know, will it just be just the neighboring schools around a school that has an incident, or can you just sort of walk us through that?
So let me start by saying I hope there's no more incidents.
Yes.
But so our plans for community lockdowns versus lockdowns would stay the same. I do think that you will see a change in the term, because just community lockdown, the term needs to change. So that's a discussion that we can come back to. We've already got some really good ideas as to how to do that. But either way, that still is law enforcement driven 99% of the time. So law enforcement would call the school system directly and say we need to place this school on lockdown, or your school needs to be placed on lockdown because of this reason. On September the 1st, I cannot give you a reason. I do not know. I mean, I don't even think that some of the members of the law enforcement community can tell you. I think some of those decisions were being made by SROs based on information that they might have got by a phone call, based on information that they may have gotten from another student, based on social media. So those decisions were being driven by SROs in communication with principals. As far as those elementary schools, I was at the scene at Mount Tabor, and so I really cannot address why that. There were situations, and I'll own this piece myself, is that there were other schools that were close by that probably should have been placed on lockdown just because of the proximity, not thinking of anything else. But we had no information that any other school was in any jeopardy besides the one at Mount Tabor on that particular day. So we've already had some really great communications with really great discussions with our community partners, law enforcement, EMS, and fire across the county. We do want to get to one county standard that is a common language for every school, whether it's private, public, charter, or whatever else it is. so that when somebody says there is a lockdown, everybody knows what that means. Or when everybody says there is whatever the term for community lockdown, everyone knows what that means. And then we have the same reunification procedures across this community. This is an opportunity for this community to come together and everybody work to get to a common goal, and I think we want to be in the driver's seat, or at least to help drive that train, because I think we have the most students of anybody in this county, and we have the strongest relationships with law enforcement and the first responding team. So I think we, as a school district, have an opportunity to tighten that up and make that look better for this entire Forsyth County.
Thank you.
I think Board Member Parker had her hand up, and then we'll come back to you. Board Member Calvert Hayes.
Couple of questions on the student, with the entrance and exit of locks. Is that done through student ID? Whenever the entry points
Yes, ma'am.
of locks, but in the high school on the
Yes.
doors when they're coming in and out, and in middle schools, is that triggered by by student ID or how?
So right now, our plan is, instead of buying every kid a card, every student would use their Power School ID. Staff members would use their employee ID to enter on that keypad. For the folks, the principals, APs, and the people who have these cards would work. And it is driven by the fact that you are assigned to a school, whether it's through Power School or whether it's through HRMS. There's a file created each and every day. It's purged at the end of the day, so that the next day we have a new set of students, because we may have added a couple, we may have lost a couple. That file is created every day so that only the folks that belong in that building can get in that building.
Okay, good. That was my second question. What happens if we have a child who we don't, or an employee that we don't want on campus? So that would be, okay.
So we have the ability to kill these. So if for some reason Ms. McManus decides that Jonathan Wilson needs to be fired this afternoon,
Right.
she can kill this card and it won't work.
Okay,
So
okay, good. Another question, with the book bags, I know whenever we were implementing uniforms a long time ago, we asked, we did have some input, and we did say that I think our cutoff was like 75%, if agreed or not. And interesting enough, I went to a major college football game the other day, and they made you have a clear pocketbook or a clear book bag. They weren't letting you in, which I had a little issue with because I didn't know that ahead of time. But anyway, and also my last point would be, when we had years ago, we had a gang prevention person within central office, and I think one of the beneficial things about that was that a lot of information was given on what to look for, all those things. And Dr. Pratt, you may be going to address that in your next presentation, but at least some, I think it's been a long time maybe since staff and things have seen those, and it may not have been. You all may have been doing this all along and I'm just not aware of it, but that was really helpful for me as a board member, I know at that time, to have more information and learn some things about activity and what that looks like. So,
can I just make a comment on? So before I came to work for the school district, I worked for the North Carolina Department of Public Safety, and part of my duties was to serve on the state gang task force. So I knew what gangs looked like back when I did that. So things typically change. I will tell you that I am in communication with Sergeant Wiley with the Winston Police Department's gang task force, or their gang unit. He actually helped me do a presentation, and so I was actually on a tour of the Winston Forsyth County School, middle and high schools, to give that presentation before COVID got here. And then when COVID came, that kind of came to a stop because there was no one to present to. So that, I do think that the organizational chart that you saw, there will be somebody on that who will have some gang information and gather intel with the police department and the sheriff's department.
okay, great, thank you.
I did have one or two questions, I think. So for the security expert consultant, the question I have we considered any law enforcement organizations that may also provide that service? So for example, I know that SRO organization may have an arm for that, since they've been in the business of helping to keep our schools safe for a very long time, probably have a lot of insight on that. And then also, I think the sheriff organization, from a state perspective, may have something around security consultation for schools.
Yeah, so I'll let Dr. So what I will say that there's a very clear definition between, or delineation between law enforcement work and security work. And so, and there's some of those crossover and bleed into each other. But I think that as far as a consultant, I don't believe that a consultant has been hired, and those things can still be considered.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and then the question about the behavior assistants. Are these the same, I guess, positions that the sheriff talked about with the guys being in suits and being very proactive, progressive? I think the old model of a behavior assistant may not meet the immediate needs of children today. I think that any school would definitely be very grateful for additional hands to, make sure that we have good relationships with students. So I think that if the behavior assistants are personnel on site that can, just continue to assist with the, again, building the relationships of kids in the building, that's going to, I think, yield some positive results. So and then as I thought about 3 to 4 behavior assistants, of course, at the high school level, I think sometimes, Dr. Pratt, you and I both spend a lot of time in high school. You always think about the grade level, and has there been any consideration where if you have 4 behavior assistants, I'm like, put one on 9th grade, 10th grade, so that that person knows those are the 9th graders I go and talk to, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to.
Yeah, and that is correct. And we are building a new model. So I don't know what the model was in the past here, but we are implementing a new model around the behavior assistants in the district. And they are strategically placed in the building, and that will be their assignment. They won't stand physically, they are to roam, but the part of that is to get to know the kids who are in that section of the building throughout the day. Yeah.
And then the last question is about parent and community involvement. I know that I have received some very specific requests from parents to be involved in whatever we're doing, to be proactive, to support their their child and all students in the building. So I know that the Sandy Hook initiative has a parental involvement component, and so I just wanted to know if we were thinking about how to get parents involved in our schools in a very systematic way, instead of them instead of them maybe feeling left out and disconnected from what we're doing. And to that, the same goes for the community. I know that I've gotten a invite next week for a community event presentation on how we can prevent violence in our communities and schools. So it looks like there's some community energy around trying to be engaged with this too.
Yes, and we are working on that. I know we've reached out to Sandy Hook already and researching some of that, so you'll see some of those initiatives within our district. And we are also probably begin the process of soliciting community input as well. And I think that's some part of Dr. Stokes' presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm gonna call her up, Dr. Stokes, to start out the social, emotional, and mental health support. I've got one more question. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lauren.
My only question was the pickup for the parents with their kids. I know we were at the Harris Teeter, and will we have a kind of set place for parents to go if we have to have this again? How will we work that out? Because I know the parents were pretty frantic as to where to go, how to go, and I didn't know if it would be anything that would be kind of set up in place if this ever happened again.
Right.
So I can respond. Do you want me to respond first? And then, so part of our school plans are reunification sites. In this instance, it needed to be changed at the direction of law enforcement. So we're working in our debrief with law enforcement. That's part of our next steps with reunification, is kind of mapping out if there needs to be a change to the locations. That day, it was driven by different reasons why we went where we went. So there were lots of people at the table making those future decisions. But Dion, did you want to add to that?
That's essentially what I was going to say.
Yeah, Dion was there too. We were all there. There were a group of about 5 of us in a debrief with many of the first responder and law enforcement agencies to talk exactly about the reunification process. So, yeah.
Okay, and I have 2 questions for Jonathan. One is about the clear bag. Will this apply to musical instrument cases, athletic equipment bags, art portfolios, camera bags? I guess where I'm leading is, you can do clear backpacks, but there's a lot of other containers coming into schools that somebody could hide contraband in. So that's my concern, and I think Board Member Jones' concerned about the feel safe versus being safe. So would it apply to those other containers?
So I would just say that the pilot at that particular school, the details of that still being worked out, obviously. There's a lot of things to consider, so I would just defer back to
Okay.
what Ms. McManus
And then
said.
my other question is about safety and security on campuses that have public streets going through them. My son, in between periods this week, witnessed a car pull up with 4 people on Northwest Boulevard. The entire car emptied, and they jumped a girl in front of Bryson Gym. What are we doing to combat that type of thing? You know, I know some of our campuses have public streets running right up through them, and that is a real concern, to think you're just a kid walking to your PE class and a carload of people jump you and you are beat down on the sidewalk.
So one thing I'll say is that we intentionally placed cameras. Now, cameras doesn't stop things from happening, but we intentionally placed cameras all around Bryson Gym and the auxiliary gym so that we have a great view of that area. But I would hope that anytime there's transitions, that there will be somebody to supervise. There was SROs on campus. There's additional SROs roaming. You know, those campuses where you have cars, streets coming through. I'm trying to think besides Reynolds, where else that may be. But I do understand the concern.
Okay, yeah, I obviously can give specific examples to that school, but I'm sure that scenario could happen at another school.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to start my presentation off by first thanking the Student Support Services staff for all the work that they do. Our school psychologists, our school counselors, and our school social workers and nurses, they work extremely hard, and they were a part of the crisis response team. But not only are they a part of the crisis response team, they're a critical part of the process of improving school climate, fostering engagement and support for all of our students and our parents. And so today I would just like to share a few things regarding where we are right now with our Student Support Services staff in supporting the social, emotional, and mental health support needs and the additional plans that we have forthcoming. So for our current supports, we do have school counselors in all of our buildings. We have school social workers, school psychologists, and like I said, our nurses. And they're able to provide that individual counseling, small group counseling. If you go in many of our elementary schools, you'll see them doing classroom guidance where they're actually talking about decision-making processes when they're meeting with students and going through classroom guidance. And then they're always there for consultation and support for our families and students. And they do a lot of referrals to outside agencies and a lot of resources that parents need and that students need. They do a lot of that referral process. So we also have, other than our Student Support Services staff, our wonderful partners within the community. Those individuals help us with school-based mental health services. And those services are available to all of our schools across the district, where they can select a provider that will be a referral source, where they can come in and they can actually support students in the school settings. They can pull them out, they can meet individual with the students, and they also connect with their families. And so that's the opportunity that all of our schools have, to have a provider to provide those services. And then in addition to all the work they do, they are trained in the suicide risk screenings and assessments, and they are trained in behavior threat assessment and management. So our student services staff is trained in these areas for prevention and intervention, and then they're constantly continuing to work with our families. We're having some parent sessions next week where we're reaching out to Mount Tabor families and the families across the community, because we know that this has impacted our entire community and not just the Mount Tabor families. But we're going to do some specialized things in October at our Parent Support Forum for Mount Tabor, and then we're also doing some other things for our families across the community starting next week, where we'll give them the opportunity to come in and talk about resources, additional resources that may be needed, for them to give us ideas and thoughts, and for us to share with them what we have available and how we can provide more support to families. And so we are starting that work with the community. The community has been very open. They've been emailing, they've called, and they've offered support, and we've been speaking with them and setting a framework so that we can continue to build our community partners and work within the community. So as we start, one of the things that we wanted to look at was, what does our upcoming professional development look like? What else do our student support services staff need to be able to assist and support and help our families? And so some of the critical trainings that we've listed: trauma resilience training, where we're looking at trauma, what are the signs, how do we build a framework in our schools to support, and we partner with our community agencies to provide this support. So we started some of that training in September with some of our school social workers, attended the trainings, and we will work through the resilience training throughout the remainder of the year, because we want to make sure that we have as many schools involved in that training, and we want to make sure that we have that knowledge so that we can bring those skills back to our school and continue to work and support our families. And then when we look at mental health training, the state has indicated to us, and we approved the mental health plan for the district, the state has indicated that mental health is a priority across the entire state. So it is now required of 6 hours of training for our administrators, our teachers, and our specialized instructional support personnel to receive some type of mental health training. And so we're building that in. We're making it virtual, and then we're also having some options where they can come in and get specific trainings, because we want to make sure that not only our student support staff is privy and understand mental health, we want to make sure our teachers and our administrators have that knowledge base also. And so as a part of our mental health plan, we are training administrators, teachers, and specialized instructional support personnel. They will get training on warning signs, what to do, how to support students that may be experiencing a mental health challenge. And then as we look at our adult socio-emotional learning, we know that our Director of Socio-Emotional Learning and Restorative Practices has been hired and has started the work. She's had the opportunity to meet with principals, and they have embraced the socio-emotional learning piece of it and the adult piece. So starting with our staff members, talking with them about socio-emotional learning and providing professional development. She's actually received invites from various schools to come out and do some work with our staff. And so that'll start December through the remainder of the year. We'll be focusing on that. And then we want to make sure the youth mental health first aid, we want to get more trainers within our district. We had a few individuals that are training, but we're looking to train 10 more additional staff, our counselors, our lead counselors, our Director of Social Work Services, nursing services. We want to make sure that we can offer that training across the district. So we're increasing the number of trainers that we have across the district that can deliver this training face-to-face to our staff and face-to-face to our community. And then as we look at restorative practices, that's going to be an important part too from January to June 22. We're also having additional individuals trained in restorative practices. When we're looking at restorative practices, we're looking at not just training them and then leaving. We're looking at training, and then we're coming back, we're monitoring, we're working with the individuals in their schools, and we'll use our social emotional learning coaches to do that so that we're implementing restorative practices with fidelity. That it's not a train and then we're gone. It's a train and then we're constantly here. We're monitoring how does it work. Is there additional training that's needed within the schools? So we want to take it a step further to make sure that we're not just training and then leaving it up to the school alone to do the work. We want to make sure that we're back in the schools supporting those efforts. And then school crisis prevention, our school psychologist department typically is trained in that area. That's preparedness, readiness, and intervention support, and we're wanting to get more individuals trained as a trainer in that particular area so that we're just really focusing in on our staff and building their skill set so that they can help additional students, and not only just students, also staff in our community. So we talked a little bit earlier about student programs. I think student programs, clubs, we have to have student voice. We have to have their input. They have to assist us. They, a lot of times, know a lot more than we do, and they are often wanting to talk with their peers more so than talking to the adults. So we're looking at one form of mentorship programs where we're building mentors within the schools, people to work more closely with our students and build relationships, and someone that's going to, really invest their time, go to any after-school events and really connect with them. So we're looking to start building those formal mentorship programs throughout the district. And then peer mediation programs. I think that kids have to know how to solve their own problems or how know when to ask for assistance. And so really want to implement peer mediations. There are a few schools that have it, but really want to implement peer mediation programs where kids can talk to other kids, that they can get buy-in from other individuals. They know who to come talk to. So we want to take that time to go in and train those individuals, especially at the middle school level, especially at the middle school level. Would love to see that. And then Save Promise Clubs. That's the Students Against Violence Everywhere clubs. And I know some of our schools may have it, but as we implement Sandy Hook, that's a big part of Sandy Hook. And I've had the opportunity to go to the trainings that they've had for their Save Promise clubs, and the training is outstanding. And so we want to make sure that we have that, because kids can help us with curbing the violence also. They are able to, if they see something, say something, and that stops it a lot of times once they start sharing information. So we want to take an approach where we're focusing on our staff and making sure that they're appropriately trained and making sure that they have the skill sets that are needed, and to make sure that we can reach out to the community and offer training throughout. And then we want to make sure that we're focusing on student voice. Student voice is important too. They're a big part of this process, and we cannot leave them out. And then, as you stated, parents. Parents are important. Parents have ideals. Parents understand the safety of their students. So we want to make sure that we're also getting input from parents, and that we're offering a forum where they can come in, ask their questions, where we can share with them. Here's our additional resources within the community. And so we want to take a whole school, whole community approach to student services and working with families and staff. Additional student services personnel, because that's what we'll need to make sure that this happens, and make sure it happens with fidelity. Like I said, it's about more than just training and then leaving. We have to monitor the process. We have to go back in and make sure that it's implemented properly and be a support system for the schools. So we're looking at 5 additional school social workers to be hired, and that's in progress right now. We have the positions posted, and we're in the interview process. And school counselors, they're important too. They're important within their schools. We're looking to add 5 additional school counselors, school psychologists, 5 additional school psychologists too, And then a mental health coordinator, someone that's able to help coordinate services, work with all of our different community agencies to make sure that we're making referrals for students, to make sure that we're coordinating our efforts so that we can serve students. And then we have the 5 socio-emotional learning coaches. Those are going to be the individuals that work on the adult socio-emotional learning, our socio-emotional learning curriculum when we determine what will be utilized. And then they'll be working with the restorative practices and the follow-up, the monitoring, and the additional supports. And then we have the district mentorship administrator. That's what I talked about a little bit earlier, about having those mentors for our students. That individual will come in and help us build those mentorships in our different schools, help us connect with community members that may want to become a mentor and work with a small group of students. And then we also have 5 licensed behavior health providers that we want to bring in. We want to increase the number of mental health coaches or behavior health providers that can come in and provide resources to our families and supports to our students. And so we want to be able to increase. Right now we just have our school-based mental health, but we don't have those 5 behavior health providers that can come in and actually provide additional support to our families. So staffing will be critical in the process and making sure that we have individuals to help support all of these different efforts. So we're at the point where you can ask me any questions.
Thank you. This is just wonderful, and I am sure this is going to make a huge difference with all of our children, all of our teachers and families. So I just wanted to ask you, when I first got on the board, there was a program that I was introduced to that I was so impressed with, and I think that one summer Project Impact maybe funded a pilot in an elementary school for this program, and I think another school has raised money to use this, and just want to know where we are with this. It's called Feeling and Friends, and I just thought it was fabulous. I mean, it could impact kindergarten all the way up through high school, and I think that it would just be a wonderful tool in our toolbox for social emotional learning. Are you familiar with it?
I am familiar with it. I think I've met with Ms. Kuttrell from Feeling and Friends. I spoke a little bit about the socio-emotional learning curriculum, and we haven't established that, so we're in the process now. I actually have a meeting tomorrow that we'll be meeting with our team and working on an RFP so that we can put the request for proposals for all different socio-emotional learning curriculums, and then we'll look at all of those curriculums together. We'll have a district team that will look at that information, and we'll have we're in the process right now of assessing what do we have in the district as it relates to socio-emotional learning. What curriculums are we using? I know that a part of our mental health plan is Second Step, and that's a program that has been used in the district and had already been purchased. But right now we're starting at the needs assessment. What do we need as far as SEL? And we want feedback. We want feedback from teachers because we know that it can't be a standalone. It has to be embedded into the curriculum. And so from there, we are developing the RFP, our request for proposals, and I'm sure Feeling and Friends will submit their proposal, and then we will look at all of the areas. There have been a lot of individuals that have reached out and really is concerned, really want to have a curriculum, but we want to make sure that we take everyone through the same process so that we can remain consistent. So we'll do a request for proposals for that, and they'll all submit that, and then we'll have a team of individuals that look through the proposals to decide which curriculum do we need to go through, which one will best serve our students in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County schools. So they're definitely on the radar. I've spoken with them, and so they will have the opportunity to go through that process for the request for proposal. And John Mann reached out to me actually last night, so we're scheduling a meeting for tomorrow for that request for proposal. But really want to make sure that we look at what we already have, what we're using, and then get input from a variety of individuals regarding what do we need so that we can make sure that whatever curriculum that we go with is meeting the needs of our students and families.
have we done anything, and I know this is really different, when we look at a child psychiatrist? Has our school system, I mean, do we get involved in that at all, or is that just mainly, going individually with parents? But I know there's a big difference in the psychiatry when, we talk about that. My daughter-in-law is a psychiatrist. Mm-hmm. So I just wondered, how that works with the medicine involved. And I know we're not a hospital and, we don't do things like that. But I just wondered if we have a critical case, do we refer that on, or how do we do something like that?
We do. We make referrals all the time. If there's a student that we feel like may need some support, we've tried our Tier 1 interventions, and the next presentation is going to talk a little bit about that. But if we've tried different interventions and they're at the Tier 3 level where we may have to refer out for services, we do make the referrals to whoever our school-based mental health provider is. We would kind of start with them. And then it's a lot, we speak with the families individually. So some of them may already be seeing a psychiatrist. So we might have to make sure we have a consent on file to make sure that we can talk with them, share information, and they can share information back with us. But when there's signs, and after we've gone through Tier 1 and Tier 2 supports, Tier 3 often is when we're reaching out for additional behavior assistance or psychologists or psychiatrists. And then we want to make sure we have that two-way consent on file so that we can share information with them and they can share information on us. So that's really working with the families, and our social workers and counselors and psychologists does that a lot, work with the families to see kind of what are you already being provided, because some of them may have already, they're maybe already seeing a therapist. But we do, and there's a referral process.
Thanks.
Thank you for all you're doing, and I was really glad to hear that it sounds like we're doing more things proactively. I think we've typically offered a menu, and I think you get more participation when you actually hand out samples of things, and I think that's really important. And I'm definitely hearing from parents and students and staff a demand for forums where there's time set aside to talk or discuss these issues of safety, of stress, that type of thing. And I'd like to make sure that we're offering orientations or information sessions about things we have to offer, because there's a lot of people who don't understand what certain things mean, and it would, it's kind of like going to the travel log. I might not have ever thought I wanted to travel to Williamsburg, but when I went and heard about it and thought, oh, that sounds like a good family vacation, I might actually participate in it. And I think we need to do the same thing about our mental health services to make them more open and get people to inquire. My other item here is about the mentorships. And we have a lot of natural mentors in our teachers, counselors, club advisors, coaches. Will they be able to take advantage of the training that you're talking about for mentors so that they can further assist the students that they already have relationships with?
Yeah. And I think a lot of our work with social emotional learning that we'll be offering to staff, that helps build upon the mentorship. How do you build a relationship with the student? How do we determine what their interests are? So they will have the opportunity to be a part of that mentorship process. And like you said, they're doing it anyway.
Yeah, and in that vein, I hope that we'll be funneling more kids into programs that we already provide. And I know a lot of private and parochial schools require extracurricular participation. I mean, I don't know that we can require it, but I think at a minimum, we should be encouraging it for every student, if for no other reason than that they have a safe place to be after school with an adult mentor, hopefully doing something that they enjoy. But I would like to see I'd like us to stress that and make that a priority, that we get kids involved and engaged after school.
I agree. The more they're connected to their schools, the better off that they typically do academically.
You go ahead. You go ahead.
Go ahead, I'm trying to get my thoughts together.
Okay. Good morning, Dr. Stokes.
Good morning.
I'm gonna let you know ahead of time, I got a few questions.
Okay.
So starting off, could you please just, and if you don't know these specifically, just kind of give me a rough estimate of how many social workers, counselors, and psychologists we have within the district currently?
Yes. So for elementary school, we have 46.5. For middle school counselors, we have 36.5. And high school counselors, we have 56. So that's a total of 139 for counselors. For psychologists, we have 22 that serves K through 12 and 2 pre-K, so that's a total of 24. And then when we look at our social workers, we have 45.7. And this is what, those are our numbers without our additional staff that we're hiring, so
Right.
yes.
Okay. And then could you just tell me the difference between a social emotional learning coach and a licensed behavioral health provider?
Sure. So our licensed behavior providers are licensed therapists. So they can provide the actual therapy, counseling, and support to students. Our social emotional learning coaches are individuals. They're not therapists. They're not social workers. They could be educators, could be teachers. It could be a counselor, could be a social worker, could be an admin. And so these are individuals that are actually focused on the social emotional learning supports. They're focused on climate and culture within the schools. How do we greet our students when they come to school? What programs do we have in our schools? What about our own SEL, social emotional learning as adults? You know, we always don't get it right as an adult. And so we're talking about decision making. So those are the areas that they're focused on. They are not therapists. They are not gonna, sit down and meet with students and provide therapy or counseling to them. They are going in helping with the school climate. They're working with teachers on building relationships with students. They're working with teachers on responsible decision making. They're talking about how do we actually support our students in multiple ways academically, and it's built into the everyday curriculum. So it shouldn't be just where the counselors are going in and doing classroom guidance. This is what we want embedded every day. So when you're coming in, you're getting a greeting where you have the opportunity to talk about your day and your feelings and things like that. And so the social emotional learning coaches are not therapists. They're not mental health providers or anything like that. They are educators from various disciplines that provide behavior support and ways that we can connect with students more.
So at this moment, we have a district level cares team, right?
We do.
That's based in central office?
No.
Well, I mean,
They're
not based, but.
Yeah, they're not based in central office. They're within our schools supporting families and supporting our staff. So we do have them.
And so at one point, did we have CARES teams within individual schools comprised of school staff, like kind of localized? Do we still have that?
We do. We still have CARES leads at each of our schools. And so those CARES leads, they're working with our school teams. If they have additional referrals that need to be made, then they do make those referrals to our district CARES team, and they go out, try to find families. We're still in the midst of COVID. And so, kids may be out, they may need additional support. So the CARES team are providing those level of supports to families.
And so do we have a system of sort of tracking, so when a CARES team, sort of tracking the work of a CARES team, so we take on let's say we have an issue, or do we keep a ledger of and so where we are at one point we're sort of closing out something, so we have it, okay, that's kind of done. Is that how we?
Yeah,
okay.
So they have, a referral process where they enter the referral system in, and then they're letting us know weekly, Ms. Adams, about the work that they're doing within the community. So we just had a big push with immunizations because we know that our students were going to be excluded if they did not get the necessary immunization. So they've helped us work on our health supports also. And so they're going in and they'll put down what their areas that they've been focused in on, and Ms. Adams is able to look at the work that they've done throughout the week.
Okay. So just a couple of additional thoughts. want to share just some notes I jotted down. I think ultimately, I really love the work that is sort of being done in our plans moving forward, especially related to PD. The just concern I have, I think, is sort of around, I want, especially in our student services staff who are already, and we talked about this for a very long time, about how even prior to the pandemic, you know, student services writ large were sort of under-resourced and underfunded, right? And people sort of felt, I think even at that time, the pressure. Now even more, we're sort of, you know, with the need, there's additional pressure. And so I want us to really look at sort of our internal kind of workflow and practices, try to make sure that we're doing everything we can, even though I know we're hiring these additional folks, but I hope that we're doing everything we can to kind of streamline services, make our current staff feel comfortable and valued. I know that, you know, as an example, if an elementary school has one counselor and that counselor is on the specialist rotation, having to be in classrooms every day, they don't necessarily have the time to be able to work with the students on an individual basis. And so there's additional support needed there, as well as, you know, as the sort of mental health needs are rising, I think looking at schools, you know, that need is sort of across the district. I know that now, because we've experienced some things relative to sort of gun violence and additional mental health issues, that's exacerbated the mental health issues that have been caused by the pandemic, right, which are very prevalent. And then as we're bringing on new folks, that we are we are relying on the perspective and valuing the perspective of people who have been and worked in the district for quite some time and have worked with these communities and in these schools, especially in this climate where just the sort of reality of trying to fill certain positions. We just want to make sure that even if financially we can't, you know, bolster these positions in a way that we need to, that we're just going above and beyond to make people feel valued.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
I have a quick thing. I know years ago we had the thing, we were a part of the Rachel's Challenge, and we had, you know, all the schools came together at times, and we had a big rally, so to speak. Is that still something that's around? I know that there was a lot of just camaraderie, for one thing, between students and staff. And
I've heard a lot about that. We just spoke about that in senior team regarding Rachel's Challenge. From my understanding, I think with COVID, it phased out a little bit. So that's something that we're definitely looking to. I know I was just at Mount Tabor the other day in the cafeteria. They had big Rachel Challenge signs up. So that is something that we can definitely look into. You know, is that something that is still going on that we can participate in?
Right, you know, like you say, right now with COVID, we obviously can't have huge events, but within the individual schools, and that encompassed, my memory serves me correctly, elementaries, middles, high schools, everybody, you know, so.
Was that the one around bullying, Rachel's Challenge?
And we used to have little arm, you know, they had little arm bracelets and all kinds of things, and each individual school did different things, like, you know, chains, and, I mean, it was a pretty, I don't know, it was a good way to bring about awareness, I think, and there again, lots of parents were involved in that. It was an easy way to get parents on board as well, so just, some of that may still be around for you to check into. To me, it was a very positive thing.
Thank you.
Dr. Stokes. So as it relates to the parent sessions for Mount Tabor, I think Leah and I have definitely been very supportive of the energy of Reynolds parents wanting to definitely connect in a proactive way for the school and to I think collaborate with some of the Mount Tabor families. So I think if maybe your office could try to provide some support for helping the parents at Reynolds, and I think maybe Leah and I can give you the contact name for the parents there that's asking for some, support to figure out how to create some activities that they can be involved in as parents, so that they don't feel like they're going off doing something separate than what the school district is doing. So I wanted to highlight that. I also wanted to highlight there is a student at Reagan that started a community organization against violence in schools. It's very proactive. I actually went downtown to an event. I think the student might be a junior or senior, and I can give you her contact name because apparently that's how I actually met families from Reynolds and Mount Tabor and Reagan. They were all downtown trying to figure out how to be proactive for our students so that students know that there are other options than violence. Question about the licensed behavioral health providers. Is that a private or public? So would they work for us, or we're contracting them out as private?
We'll be working with the School Health Alliance and contracting them out through the School Health Alliance. We'll be contracting through the School Health Alliance.
So if there's a licensed health provider in our local community, they would have to go through that organization, or they already assumingly a part of that organization if they're licensed?
Yeah, the School Health Alliance, they post the position and then they hire for the staff. And so they'll probably can reach out to Dr. Daniel. I don't know if they're already a part of the Health Alliance, but they do post the position, and it is hired through the School Health Alliance.
Could you email me that? Because I know that there are some people in the community that are behavioral health specialists that live in the community of where a lot of the stress is happening that could then be better situated and relevant. And then the last question quickly, how are we connecting these supports to the COVID piece? And so, of course, we know that there is generational COVID impact, which some argue that because our children were not in school for over a year and a half, it has created some sort of, I guess, retention in behavior, right? And I would assume that what we're doing right now was a part of already where we were going with the COVID piece to support social emotional learning. And so I was just wanting to make sure that it's very seamless in that way.
Yeah, and so, and I think a lot of work with COVID, those are those individual counseling sessions, when students are returning and, we're meeting with them, or when they're out, trying to make sure that they're okay. And really taking the time, especially at the beginning of the school year, to understand who the kids are within the building and if they have experienced any grief or loss. And so, once we find that information out, then, the counselors and social workers can kind of work with those families to kind of see what the needs are as we look at, the COVID challenges and things like that.
And so, Dr. Stokes, and this may be a question that Ms. McManus has to answer. Are COVID dollars going to any of the positions that we're adding as it relates to the additional student services personnel?
Yeah, a lot of that page is covered in ESSER. Those were
Okay.
some of the original decisions, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So with that, with the cost of that ESSER, I know we had those funds for probably through.
3 years.
3 years.
Yep.
And so now are we, I know without those funds that wouldn't happen. So are we going to start asking, are we preparing now to ask for, I guess those dollars would come from the county? Is that kind of
and
what we're doing?
hopefully the state. The governor himself
Right.
talked about the need to enhance student services staff. So, our goal would be, and we started with 5 only that we're sending out to schools, specific schools, 5 more counselors, 5 more social workers. If I had it my way, we would be sending way more. It's about hiring them and then about being able to sustain this. And so, we're talking about how will we sustain this over time. I do think that results help when we go to the table to ask for more. And what I'd like to have is data about how these extra folks that we're sending to schools have actually had an impact. But my goal down the line is to actually have at least a nurse, a psychologist, a social worker, and multiple counselors in every school. I mean, that is where I think we need to go as an educational system, because it hasn't just been 18 months that have caused the trauma our kids, they've been dealing with trauma, and the pandemic has added to it. But we have not been responsive enough in education to make sure we've got the adequate staff. So we'll be talking about sustainability, Board Member Jones, and then and figuring out how to do. It will be local, and also I'm hoping by that point in 3 years that the state comes around and says, you know what, yeah, we need to fund this differently.
And I will add to, I think Chair Woodbury had talked about parents from Reynolds wanting to have some conversations and things like that. And I hope that we as a district can help administrators in all of our high schools have those conversations with parents. I don't think I know we've had particular certain instances that have happened at certain schools, but I believe that all of our high school parents have concerns, and I think our students want to also, in all of our high schools, have that forum to where they can express what they're feeling, and so I would really hope that we do that district-wide at all of our schools, all of our high schools.
One, as Dr. Pratt's transitioning up to bring our next speaker, I want to let you know, so one of the things we talked about Monday morning in staff was, you know, we're still in the pandemic, but this school year starting, how are we stopping to allow the conversations? How are we stopping? I mean, we obviously have a lot of work to do around academics, but the academics will not improve without the stopping to address the needs, and that is from both teachers and students. Yesterday in our principals meeting, then we spoke to principals about creating the space, and they need to figure it out with their staffs. We are not going to say, this is how you're going to do this, and this is how you're going to do it across the board. The people that can solve a lot of the problems are sitting in our schools, and they need to speak with their admin team to figure this out. But what we did say to principals is, we are giving you permission to stop. If it is a period a week that kids have, you have got to create the space for kids to talk. If you've got to do that with adults. We talked about funding, additional funding we want to send out to schools to be able to do things with staff members that they normally cannot do because there's so many strings with dollars. And so we shared some things with principals yesterday that they were very excited about, to hear that we are saying to do this. We've got to keep making sure kids have great instruction, but we've got to make sure that kids have outlets to speak, that there are forums for voice, for parent voice, teacher voice, and student voice. And so we will continue that conversation with our building leaders to figure out what that looks like, letting them share with each other what that could look like. But our staffs and our schools have got to also be part of that solution about what that can look like in schools. We can be as creative as everybody wants to be when it comes to scheduling SEL and time for people to have their voice heard. So, Dr. Pratt.
Yes, thank you. So our last portion of the presentation deals with our core behavior model that we will be implementing in the district-wide. So Ms. Shannon Dodson is here to share that with you today.
Good morning. So I didn't know I signed up for a round of speed dating. Good thing that we're at the last very end, and I promise to pay attention to the time. I do want to just say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all about something I feel so passionately about, that I've dedicated my career as a special educator in for the past 20 years, and also to our Exceptional Children's Division, because they allocate the resources to allow me to be here and to speak to you about prevention and intervention around behavior supports. So I'm going to give you a little bit of dose of what I call alphabet soup. We wouldn't be in the world of education if we didn't talk about ABCs and 1, 2, 3s and have jargon. What allows us to be here and understand behavior supports is what we consider a framework for continuous school improvement, which is MTSS. MTSS stands for a multi-tiered system of support. It merges academics and behaviors and the problem-solving process that we look at to support students at a core, supplemental, and intensive level. As Dr. Pratt said today, we're going to really focus on talking about core behavior supports, and so that's what I'll be sharing with you. By understanding how this framework works and by giving attention to the process. We are making schools more inclusive and equitable. We're giving kids what they need when they need it, and we're also allocating resources to our adults, the people that are in school buildings, to be effective problem solvers, not only around academics, but around behavior too. So what does that mean specifically about behavior? Because MTSS is multifaceted and it includes many different systems in it and they're integrated. I'm going to speak to you solely on behavior. This system works exponentially. So when you think about behavior as your foundation, this is a multi-tiered framework. Our system has core supports. Core supports are basically your universal supports. It's what we outfit our schools to supply for everybody. Everybody gets a dose of it. We're going to talk exactly about what those are in the next couple of slides. And then as we move up and we problem solve around those core supports, there is additional supplemental and intensive layers. And basically what I like to say is that there are some students in our building that they're going to need core, but they're going to need core plus more in terms of behavior. We can also apply this to our system of practice as district personnel as well. And when we look at that as problem solving away how we're delivering these supports to the staff that are in the building. I also like to give you the analogy of think of your house. If you purchase a home and you start to notice specific cracks in the walls or in the windows, you can go around and put Band-Aids on all of those pieces. But if you don't look at what's happening within the foundation and your core and fix those areas first, you're going to continuously have those same problems. So we want a fully functioning core. Core supports allow us to deliver regular, proactive support in teaching and preventing what I'm going to say is unwanted behavior. It's emphasizing that we should not make any assumptions that kids come to us and they automatically know how to walk in the hallway or how to engage in a classroom, right? They're pro-social skills and they are expectations that we take time to teach those. Just like we teach you how to add and to problem solve, we're going to teach you about, like Dr. Stokes was saying, social and emotional supports, but also how to engage with the curriculum and be a student. We're looking at systems, data, and practices continuously at each one of those levels and supporting our educators in the building to use that information on how it impacts student outcomes. So you heard me talk about this core behavior, and so core behavior supports really center around 10 core behavior practices for adults. We basically have to understand this from a very adult level in order for it to transfer over into our classrooms, right? So the top 4 that you see, the universal behavior expectations, there's a behavior matrix, and effective instruction for school-wide expectations, right? How do we know how we're expected to go into an assembly, right? We teach that, we model it, we reinforce it. And then defining classroom managed versus office managed behaviors. And that's a little bit more in depth. And it takes a little bit more time, but luckily we do have the resources to provide that information, but also to support them through coaching and modeling. And then lastly, which are the last 6, those are more of like your interacting and corrective strategies. When we're talking about pre-corrections, ratios of acknowledgement, that just means our positive to negative ratio, paying attention to what we're doing and what we're addressing in classrooms. Sometimes it's easier for us to pay attention to the negative because that gets our attention than to see what's going on that's positive, right? The brain picks up negative. It takes the brain longer to process a negative statement than it does a positive. Negative things stick around. You think about a day where everything's been going right for you, and then suddenly something happens that's wrong. What do you focus on? The wrong. So we're right. So we're trying to build that up in our teachers so that they can understand that, and that helps kids say, "Oh, this is what you want me to do. This is the quality feedback that I'm getting for that." The correction of behavior errors, and then also active adult supervision. That is key and instrumental. And we're talking about proximity. Are we paying attention to what's happening? Because we are adults. We're human. Education is tough. It's hard. So we're going to bring up, we do have a plan that is in place that looks at all of these pieces. Of course, as everything, we are, DPI created this initiative around MTSS. You might have also have heard this through behavior support such as PBIS. I say that this is PBIS 2.0. So We're taking a look now and integrating all the other pieces, again, the academic and the behavior, to look at the whole picture of the child and to also look at those social and emotional supports. So as far as our training plan, we want to make sure that we're giving schools and teachers, not overwhelming them, but giving them bite-sized pieces that allow them to digest this information, work on some artifacts, the production of what is the school-wide core principles, what's the student voice in that, how does that represent our school community, and then create some output and get feedback on that and start running it in their buildings. There's several different modules. So module 2 is looking at the curriculum and instruction piece. If we're creating, a school-wide expectations and a matrix around that, how are we going to teach that to our kids actively, not just at the beginning of the year, but constantly throughout? How are we using data to see, is this system and all these practices working? Because teachers have a lot of data in front of them. It's helping them realize what they have in front of them and how to utilize it. When we talked about creating those staff expectations, modules 4 and 5, which move into the interaction pieces, are the effective responses to student behavior. They are a little bit more healthy doses. They require a little bit more attention to detail, but it's necessary because these are instructional practices that teachers, we don't always get those when we're in college, in our college courses. And again, each module does have a task in developing that as a school unit and as a school team. We can go back to the presentation, trying to be aware of my time. And then lastly, just to give an overview about our district and where it's at, remember I did say that this is like PBIS 2.0. So we did fund efforts and we did have schools. This was not a mandate. So we had schools that volunteered to participate in these efforts, and we still have them that are using some of those. We do want to establish some walkthroughs to see what's happening in terms of core supports and to give feedback. But overall, we have 27 schools that understand pieces of core, and then we have 6 middle schools. We don't currently have any high schools that were trained in this information. Or this system, I should say. And then we had 2 non-traditional schools. So you can see that we have an opportunity for growth there and addressing core behavior supports. And this is just an implementation, a timeline, a rough draft of what this may look like in getting started. Obviously, we want to make sure that we are integrated because that's what the MTSS framework says. And making sure that we have our language with social and emotional learning in there and working with our MTS, the academic piece, to make sure that we're producing and delivering information that doesn't overwhelm and create initiative fatigue. That baseline data, which we're already starting that through the walkthroughs that the district assessment teams, and then moving on to looking at how we select and deliver that PD to targeted schools moving forward, and then continuous improvement, because any framework for student outcomes and student and school improvement is going to require that we're constantly looking at what our data is telling us. How can we better those systems and practices that are in place, getting the voice of what's happening in those buildings? And then I think I did a pretty good job of bringing us through that. I do, before we start the question session, I do want to say, I truly believe in this because it is evidence-based. It's founded in and funded through the Office of Special Education Programs because I believe that kids do well if they can. It's skill, not will. And we have the opportunity here to build in those skill sets with not only our teachers, but our students too.
Okay, before anybody responds, can I also say that this is not, although it's funded out of EC, this is something we need to expand on, and it's not just for students with exceptionalities at all. These are, I will tell you, you go see a chaotic school, and they have no tier 1, none, zilch. I promise you, every time, you are going to see a lack of expectations, a lack of clarity, a lack of teaching. That is where you'll see a chaotic school. And so our assessment teams right now, they're looking at all of this. You can't have one of those pieces missing. Jonathan's piece, Frederica's piece, Shannon's piece, one piece of that is missing, we're missing the boat. So all 3 of these are important, but this one and Frederica's are the most important to actually making a change down the road. So Shannon, thank you for doing that quickly. We'll open it up for questions or comments.
This is not probably a question I don't know if you can answer, or Ms. McManus, but the core behavior practices that we talk about for adults, and I think that's so important, and not just for the adults that are in our building, but how do we have a connection to try to help the adults that are in these children's lives in their homes? You know, and I think this is a bigger, you know, these are all our kids, and, you know, our adults in the building only have them so many months out of a year and so many hours out of a day. And so this is not, you know, people, I think when things start to happen in a school, they think, what's the school doing wrong? But as a community, we have to figure out why our kids, and some of it's so easy, I mean, to figure out when we have generational poverty in Forsyth County, higher poverty rates than the state and the nation. That's just one stress. And then where does that lead to all the other things? But how, and I don't know how we do this, but, you know, as a community of all of Forsyth County, not just Winston-Salem schools, but the entire county, do we have parenting, like workshops? Do we have something where we can talk to the adults that have also such an influence over the student and explain, you know, and try to explain this? How do we have any things that we can work with outside agencies on, or can we do that, or can we as a school district start to lead that conversation with leaders in Forsyth County and explain to them why this is so important?
Yep. Shannon, did you have any comments before? Do you have specific comments?
The only comment that I have to that is that this system is flexible enough that it does have a piece that we can involve the community and homes.
Yeah, so I love your suggestion right there that we record about bringing the troops together. I do know that, you know, when there was a rally at a church that we went to on a Sunday, Chair Woodbury was there, Deanna, Board Member Kaplan was there. One of the assistant police chiefs said parents are a huge part of this component. I have seen, and so yes, the answer to your question is, or to your suggestion is, yes, we need to do more around that. What I've seen that has been amazing is students that have come from traumatic experiences, when they walk into a school with strong Tier 1, strong interventions, the social skills, the social emotional, the counseling, the trauma that they would bring that could cause them to act in a certain way diminishes at least within the school building. So what our presentation is about today is a lot about what we can control within the 6 hours we have them, or 7 hours, or if they're in extracurriculars, maybe 8 to 9. But we cannot ignore that part either, of how do we bring parents on board as well.
Because it really doesn't fix, I mean, that's the key, and I understand that we only have what we can control, but I also feel like that as a district, we may have to take the lead in trying to put this out there to leaders within the entire county to say, we need your help on this. Because this is not, if the trauma and those stressors continue to happen to the student, it may not be happening in the building, but we're not, you know, as a community, we're not doing the right thing for all the kids. And so, you know, I think sometimes the community eyes look at the school district to fix the problem. But, you know, maybe we need to be the strong voice that says, we cannot do this and we need your help. And that is, just as you said, as we look at Jonathan internally for security, and we look at Dr. Stokes for those student supports, and then, you know, this is really hands-on, Shannon. I mean, it's the heart of it, but kind of as a community in Forsyth County, we need that for our families and for our kids, or it's just I don't see it changing for our students. And honestly, you know, obviously for our young people to be this way, our adults need this.
I think one of the beauties of PBIS is, and when you go into a school, to your point, without the chaos, is that there's common language. Everything is common. A child knows that if they're in one part of the building, that the same thing's going to happen if they go to another part of the building. And to Dana's point, I think that's what we as communities have to go. I know a long time ago, in the dark ages, they said, you know, that you knew if you went down the street that so-and-so was going to, you know, tattle on you if you did that. And so communities really raised our children, and I think we need to get back to that. Just like PBI, I think that's the beauty of PBIS, is that commonality, the common language, the common consequences, so to speak, and as well as the positives of everything that happens. A child knows that they're always going to be supported, and that they're going to be looked at from a positive lens as opposed to a negative. And I think we as a county and as a community, we've got to get back to taking care of each other, so to speak, and that commonality. So thank you for all the work you're doing. That PBIS is great, and I hope we can really get the ball rolling on that happening everywhere.
I just wanted to ask the question based on what Board Member Jones is referring to, where the road meets the rubber is, you know, parents and community have to be involved in, now more than ever, a very unique way. I think that at one of our meetings with the sheriff, he talked about a juvenile task force that in my mind, I thought that it was going to be very comprehensive with people in the community on his side, ideally on our side. If we want to support that effort, I think that, and I guess the question would be, Ms. McManus, what would be maybe your opinion about, you know, working with the sheriff team, with the juvenile task force, and would that be something that you could look into and bring back to the board as it relates to really doing something intentional to bring in the parent and community piece? And I think maybe with the sheriff leading it, it would send a message to our kids that, you know, you can trust, you know, law enforcement to help you instead of what you think harass your community, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that Sheriff Kimbrough has talked to, we actually have a meeting coming up very soon again, but about activities happening within after-school programs where parents would be part of that at the Y. I mean, there's a lot, there are so many. That's one program that they're doing. They have multiple, but also so many other entities are engaged at this, trying to tackle this exact thing, kind of one at a time. I think, so there's two ways to look at this. One is the community, so absolutely, Chair Woodbury, I'll bring more information back to the board. We could do that very soon about that initiative, because it's going to be really powerful with a parent component. But I think as we look at this, so you've got district initiatives and community initiatives, and then you've got daily interactions with parents on school campuses. And so many of our parents that children are facing trauma, so are the parents, to your point. And some of our parents have faced trauma, and some of that trauma may be their experiences around school, their experiences when they've come to school. Maybe they're getting parent calls all the time that they're, imagine if you got a daily call that your kid was doing this, that, the other, and it can be overwhelming. So as we start to shift this culture, in this culture of care in a strong tier 1 system and all of these supports, that includes the parent. And I know this is going to sound like, wow, that could take forever, but I've seen it happen quickly. Bringing the parent in as a partner, every parent. There is not one. I'm going to go back to, I don't believe there's one kid you can't reach. There is not one family that you cannot get an adult that cares about that kid to the table to address also their concerns and their needs and bring them into the process. That doesn't happen outside of the school site. That happens on the school site. I have seen parents that came into my school screaming and yelling that this school, this, that, the other, you all are terrible, you don't like my kid, you this and that. Turned that around when we changed our adult behaviors toward that parent and brought them in, and now that parent was a partner. And guess what happened after that? The behavior started changing across the board. So yes, we got to treat these things as a community, as a district with the community, but then honestly, it is every interaction every single day that parents face within our school campuses. So it's almost like there's so much at once that has to happen to create what you all are describing for our families. But the good news is it can actually be done if we do all this really well.
Well,
It can be done.
and I agree, and I mean, and I appreciate you saying that, because I think that, and, you know, as board members, I think we have seen that as well. I know, and I don't know, you know, this obviously is not the same thing as passing a bond, but it needed you know, this is a huge county, and I appreciate Chair Woodbury talking about what does that look like with our sheriff, right? And so that you can trust law enforcement, and I think that would go with all of our agencies that we have in Forsyth County. But when we were looking in 2016 to try to really make connections, because since we are such a large county and we have so many different municipalities within there, I think that, you know, I would like to see us bring some of this and talking about, as Marilyn said, it takes the entire community to understand behaviors and to understand what we need to do the right way for kids, understanding traumas that adults, you know, bring with them. But, you know, engaging all of there's a lot of leaders within the county, and engaging those leaders. So, you know, does this board talk, do we have forums with Winston-Salem City Council, with the Board of Aldermen in Kernersville, with the Town Council in Rural Hall? What does it look like in Clemens? What's going on in Louisville? I mean, we did that with the 2016 bond, and it passed in every precinct because we had and it wasn't a public forum, but you know, we had that, but it was also going to the leaders in that community. And so, you know, what do we need from, yeah, I live in Kernersville, so we'll talk to Kernersville. What do we need, Board of Aldermen, that you need to give us? Do we need more resources from the police department? Do we need more mentors? Can we talk to your Chamber of Commerce and say, what do we need to do for these kids? I don't know. I really feel like that's going on in our buildings. I believe people are doing everything they can, and probably more on less. I'm glad to see adding staff, but how do we really engage the community piece? Because I strongly believe that we can do everything perfect for those 9 hours a day, but without the community doing their part, we're failing the kids, and they deserve better.
I love your thinking around this. Something went off when you said, just like you did the bond forums or whatever, this is so just as much important. So I love that thinking of getting on the road with each of these groups. So we wrote it down. We'll debrief with that and get more input from you all around that. But yeah, that's really strong thinking.
I think our churches would be very, very
Yes.
involved in this also, to bring in and be a part of this in the community. So I think we definitely set something up with our churches and what they can do to help us also.
I think, lastly, definitely utilizing our communications team on how to communicate, of course, the traditional way, but also with the technology, but also, you know, just connecting with parents, maybe even door to door around, you know, being engaged with, making sure their community and our schools are safe. And I don't know what that kind of quote-unquote campaign looks like, but I think when it is intentional, people are intentional about doing things. But if we haphazardly wait for osmosis for things to happen, I think we're just going to keep hoping. But I think just really connecting with our families door to door, like our CARES members been doing. Hey, you know, are you aware of what we're doing to make communities and schools safe? We'll definitely be doing something maybe we haven't done before and should yield, you know, some better, you know, reaction. I think, as Board Member Jones have highlighted, in our communities, which we'll get the good residuals from that.
Absolutely, Chair Woodbury. And I love, you used the word campaign, I wrote that down. It really is like a campaign, a call to action. So thank you so much for the feedback today. And Dr. Pratt, did you want to give any closing remarks as we move, as we wrap up?
Yes,
Chair Woodbury?
thank you for the opportunity to share with you this morning. It's extremely important that we understand that prevention, intervention, and suppression of activities or is what we need to kind of correct our path as we move forward. Understanding the role of trauma is critical in helping our students be successful in school each and every day. And then a restorative culture that supports the psychological and physical safety and well-being of our school community can create excellent learning opportunities and environments for our students and our adults within our district. And then lastly, a strong Tier 1 system that we implement across the district to help support our students to understand what appropriate behavior is needed each and every day in our school. And I said that was the last one. I think we need to add one based on the last form of the conversation is the family and community engagement piece, right? The phase, what I call phase. And we have to begin that process as a district as we move forward. So thank you for the opportunity to share with you this morning. We look forward to partnering with you and the community as we move forward as a district. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is closed session. Is there a motion to go into closed?
So moved.
There no further question or discussion. Let it be known by aye. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Your School Channel, Cable 2.